Joining me now to dive more into the legal aspect of Donald Trump and what he's facing, Andrew Weissmann, former FBI General Counsel and an NBC News analyst. Andrew, welcome. Good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Let me start with this audio and what it does say to us and what it doesn't. On one hand, he is apparently caught on tape saying he's aware of what the classification is of said document. On the other hand, he seems to be taking precautions. Are we supposed to believe he was concerned that he couldn't share these things? What do you make of everything you understand about this audio and how potentially incriminating it is?
I think that I don't see the other hand here, frankly. If the tape exists and the underlying document exists, that is, we have the reporting on it, assuming that is all true, and assuming there is this underlying document, this is such strong evidence. This was already a very strong case, but to have a defendant on tape saying that he is possessing a classified document, remember, he's not supposed to have any government documents at all, whether classified or not, and this is saying on tape that he has possessed it. Remember, there are times when I was a prosecutor, you don't bring a case because the quality of the proof isn't that good. For instance, in the Alvin Bragg case, a lot of people talk about, well, Michael Cohen will be a witness, but Michael Cohen has lots and lots of baggage. But when you have a case like Mar-a-Lago, where in addition to the search, the documents that were found, the defendants, that is Donald Trump's inconsistent statements over and over again, the fact that there's so many witnesses who appear to have told him he cannot keep classified information, his dribbling out information back to the archives. But now you have a tape recording where he is saying, I possess a classified document. The only kind of precaution he says is, I can't give it to you, I can't read from it because it's a classified document. Well, that's not a defense to unlawful retention of a document. Right. And even his own statement actually reveals content, because the reason we know that that document relates to plans to declare war on Iran is because the reporting is that's what Donald Trump said the document contained. So he actually is disseminating, if the reporting is true, information from that document. So this is a kind of win-win-win document, the tape recording and the witnesses to it. I
was just going to say the document matters a lot here as well, because is Donald Trump's history of lying a potential defense for him?
So the answer to that's no, for the following reason. If the document that he is describing does not exist, in other words, the whole thing is just his bluffing, the evidence on that tape is still useful to show his state of mind. But all the reporting to date is that that document that he's describing does exist. And obviously Jack Smith is going to know, for sure, one way or the other, whether it does or not. But the other thing is, when you think about all of the various defenses that we've heard, many totally inconsistent, like the documents were planted, to I had every right to take the documents. Just imagine the chart that the government is going to use in opening and in summation of all of the inconsistent statements that Donald Trump made. To me, it reminds me very much of what happened in the E. Jean Carroll sexual assault case, where the plaintiff there used Donald Trump's own words and inconsistent statements to prove her case. And I think that is what we're going to see in the Mar-a-Lago case when it's brought.
Is there still a deal to be cut? If you were Jack Smith and Trump's lawyers said, all right, look, he took these documents, he didn't do this, he didn't sell them, he didn't do this, what can we, can we make a deal? Is it too late?
Well, this is where it helps that I know Jack Smith. So I'd say the deal that Jack Smith would accept is, if you want to plead guilty to a felony of unlawful retention and obstruction of the government investigation, then that's the deal. It's hard to imagine that Donald Trump would do that, because then he'd be admitting his guilt from his own mouth. And he seems, as a political matter, wanting to say, all of this is just made up. So he can't really take that position that he's accepting responsibility. So I think just as a practical matter, the government would insist on a plea that I think would be righteous for them to insist on that, because that is what they've done in numerous cases that appear to be far less egregious than the one against Donald Trump.
Do you expect Jack Smith to bring all the charges at once, or do you expect this to be piecemealed out?
Great question. So I think Mar-a-Lago, I would expect him to bring it all at once. The reason I say that is I think that there probably will be a lot of internal pressure that he will feel to get this case to trial. If he does this piecemeal, for instance, you're allowed to bring an indictment, but then to continue the investigation and to do something called a superseding indictment, which is essentially like a second indictment. The problem with doing that is that it delays going to trial. And so here, I think that there'll be concern about the American public really needing to know the answer to whether Donald Trump is guilty or not guilty of these offenses, which a jury will decide. And frankly, although I don't think he thinks this way, Donald Trump would be entitled to that as well. In other words, everyone should have their day in court, the government and Donald Trump, and it should be decided so the American public knows that in advance of the election.
Well, and very quickly, what about January 6th? You think that's a separate, that would be separated out?
Yeah, well, it cannot legally be brought in the same charging instrument. It is possible, Chuck, that they would be brought at the same time. The only reason I think that may not happen is that that's just a more, sprawling case. There's just more to do. It's conceivable that they would be brought at the same time, but I don't think so. I just think there's more to do.
Andrew Weissmann, who has an incredibly clean desk for a lawyer. Amazing there behind you, Mr. Weissmann. Thank you, as always, for providing your expertise.
You're welcome.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.